Hello, and welcome to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. I'm Erin DeVos, and I'll be your host for this season. Join us for insightful interviews that explore the work of up-and-coming independent filmmakers from all over the world. If you're passionate about film and keen to learning about the creative process from the future cinema greats, this podcast is a must-listen for you. Our mission is to provide listeners with the engaging and informative conversations about successful and innovative films, including features, shorts, documentaries, animation, and web series from across the globe. The DCIFF Film Chat Podcast is a unique opportunity for independent filmmakers to have their voices heard in a way no other film festival can provide. You can listen to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast on all podcast platforms or visit our website at DCIFF-indie.org/DCIFF-podcast. Thank you. Thank you, Karen and Leah, so much for joining me on the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. They are the filmmakers of the film Beach Show, which premiered at DCIFF 2025 this year. So again, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome. And it was good to have seen you, Karen, at the festival as well. Yeah, if you guys don't mind, just to start, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit about yourselves and as well as your film.
Sure. Let's see. Well, I'm Leah, and Karen and I met back when we lived in Boston. We were both going to the School of the Museum of Fine Arts. And I think it was after we graduated? That we started to film? Yeah.
Right after we graduated, we wanted to do something before we left Boston. Well, I was planning on leaving Boston, so we wanted to shoot something with our friends before we left Boston.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know, we were really into the, campy beach movies and just sort of had this wild idea about, getting our friends together and we thought about possibly, wouldn't it be great if we could get the makeup to play because they'd be perfect for this kind of film. And yeah, it sort of just all came together. We wrote a very short 4-page script.
Yeah.
Minimal dialogue, and somehow convinced all of our friends in these bands to take part in our short film.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say that we all kind of grew up watching cult movies and campy movies. So it was not hard to convince people to be in a beach zombie movie. And it was really fun. And ultimately it just came from a place of wanting to do something really fun with our friends that were all in the indie rock world at the time. And I actually learned from Mike Corey, who came to DCIFF, that was the first of 2 beach zombie movies that he was then in that year. So we started a trend, apparently.
We just couldn't wait for our film because we obviously were stalling on it.
Yeah, it took us a little while to finish, it's safe to say.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I mean, that's amazing, like, how you guys, like, both met and also, yeah, just starting this trend, it seems. So that's cool. And do you mind sharing a little bit about the film, too? Or what the film's about?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a spoof on like the 1960s beach movies like Beach Blanket Bingo, that, Muscle Beach Party, that. And we just sort of added a zombie twist. And it's just basically, I don't know, should we give it away? The description.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's basically a couple goes to the beach and they spend the day at the beach with a group of new friends, much like in those. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those films, but they have very thin plots. Like essentially, it's a lot of like hanging out at the beach and having fun. So we needed slightly more than that, even though that was the basic formula of those movies. So we added the beach zombie twist just because it would be fun. And there were some underlying subtext and things like that, but they're pretty, a lot of those movies are really just about dejected kind of youth. And so we wanted to kind of put a little spin on that. And so rather than our youth being just bored, or so to speak. They were, they had an alternate life as zombies.
No, I love that because Beach Show definitely pays that homage like to those campy beachy movies that are in, I think, like in the 60s, and so that's amazing. And even how the film was shot, wasn't it in a 16 millimeter or?
Yeah, it was shot on a Bolex, and so it was either all on tripod or all handheld at the time, which was, a testament to what filmmaking was like back then, or at least for a lot of indie filmmaking back then. But it was actually something that we really wanted to stick to, because a lot of the original 60s movies were very like locked off cameras, like not a lot of camera movement and single lens kind of films. So we really wanted to actually honor that.
And back then the technology was just so primitive. I mean, there was some computer editing available, but it was not much. People were still editing analog. Yeah, it was, cutting their own negative, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, people, the video camera qualities were very poor, very different than what we have today. So yeah, it was, and we didn't think of any other alternative actually but to shoot on film, because that's what we were trained in from school. And so yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of those movies were actually, some of the campier ones were shot on 16 millimeter, but some of the bigger budget ones were definitely shot on 35. But it is, it kind of worked given what the concept of the film was, for it to be shot on 16 and remain in 16. And so, I mean, flash forward to 2023, 2024, when we were actually finishing it, we had a lot of discussions of, do we want to make it 16:9? Do we want to change it and kind of update the look? And we ultimately decided no, we actually wanted to stay really, really true to it being shot on 16 and stick with that look, be an homage to those 60s cult beachy movies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, because I feel, in the day, or I guess, like, in the modern way of thinking of it, like, with different filters. So I love, like, hearing that you use, the actual, like, camera and also, like, the setting that to play into more of the film. So that's awesome. And yeah, because that was good. Also expand on one of my questions too, like what the stylistic choice was, more so to kind of like fit within that era, but also like blending kind of like the 60s to the 90s. Like what was, I guess you kinda answered that too, like whether it's
Well,
like.
I think it was really the music that kind of did that. So, you know, we collaborated with a lot of our friends on this, and it was a super low budget project, and it was really, really fun to do. But there's only a lot of the art direction was specifically like, okay, let's make it a little bit 60s, but we still want to keep it indie rock. So that's kind of where that blend started to happen.
I also,
Yeah,
which was costuming, because we were just using what we had, or asked the cast members to.
I'll show up in Hawaiian shirt, like literally.
Anything, you could wear a swimsuit from the 60s. And so some of it was just like, from our personal stash, and hopefully it would fit somebody in the cast. And some people had their own clothes. And yeah, with all the men, we were just like, just get a Hawaiian shirt.
The thing that's really interesting is, there were a handful of reasons why we ended up pausing post-production and stopping. But when you flash forward to 2024 and you look at it, it takes on a very different like retro to the 90s, retro to the 60s vibe, which, to be perfectly honest, when we were shooting in the 90s, it was really just meant to be retro to the 60s. But a little indie rock, because our friends just are. And,
Right.
You can't get away from that
Right.
with those kinds of people. And
the music is just very, very different, even though most of the music was composed specifically for the film.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to mention that none of those bands actually they're not surf rock bands at all. We specifically asked them to compose something surfish, quote unquote, in their own style for the film. And so the music is actually what really, really held the whole thing together. And so I think they all did a really, really great job between the composer and the musicians. That the music is what allowed it to be pretty timeless.
Hmm. I agree. Yeah, no, I very much liked the music too, and hearing how they had the creative freedom within that as well. So that's awesome, and really bringing the vision to light. And what were some of the, I guess, kind of thinking on the musical and nostalgic type of themes? Like, what were you hoping to explore more with Bicho? If that makes sense.
Well, I think there were a lot of like really early conversations about, you know, I remember joking around late one night saying you is making these jokes that zombie movies are always pretty one-sided. Like the zombies are basically just eating the whole time. Like their end goal for the entire movie is that they just try to eat. And we joked around about, well, what would they, I wonder what the rest of their lives are like. And so that was kind of the beginning of the merge of the two concepts. And but it really, and a lot of the beach movies where all they do is party. So we kind of took the two concepts and married them in wanting to make sure that they dance a lot and they're at the beach and they have fun, but we wanted to show a side of zombies where they're just not eating. So it's probably like the cleanest zombie eating scene on film, I think.
No, that's a very good point because I was thinking about like other zombie movies in relation to that. So
Yeah,
no.
probably the cleanest, I mean, least scary zombie movie to date.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Truly.
My 5-year-old daughter loves watching it. So it's definitely safe for kids.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, not as gory for sure.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some bones. It was gory to clean the bones for prep the bones for the film, but on camera, they're safe for children.
Yeah, the bones was that's a total tangent, but that's a funny story.
So you're more welcome to share it. So
Okay, so I y- back then, so I live in New York and now, and I was from New York, and when we were thinking about making this movie, we ironically were a handful of, I would say the majority of us were vegetarian, and so we had to like think of where to get good bones and meat for the props. And back then, the meatpacking district in New York, which is like this like super fancy boutique land in New York, was actually a meatpacking district. So I went to meat packing facility and just walked in and said, "Hi, I would like some bones for a film that I'm making. What can you give me? I'd like larger kind of human size bones." And the guys thought I was insane. And they were like, "Sure, come back tomorrow at 7 a.m." And so then I took one of my really good friends who also knew Leah very well, I just want to mention, he was a non-vegetarian. He actually made meat. I took him with me, and then we spent the next day cleaning the bones that we were given from this meatpacking facility. And that, I believe, turned him vegetarian for, I think, a couple years after that. Because that was a pretty daunting task. Like this giant, like it was like 2 big boxes of bones that had to be cleaned because we weren't shooting for another week. So we needed to make sure they wouldn't like develop maggots.
right.
And we were semi-successful in that. Like they did, in fact, develop maggots.
I didn't realize that they developed maggots.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm not going to go back there, but it was,
If only we had that behind the scenes footage.
yeah, it was, yeah. Back then, we didn't think about BTSs or anything like that, but that would have been some really hilarious BTSs, like the cooking the bones in the kitchen, trying to figure out how to clean them. That whole saga was like, bless Marcus for being along the ride with me on that one.
You couldn't just like Google like how to clean bones.
Yeah,
Right.
Really,
yeah. Google didn't exist.
Google didn't exist.
Yeah, no,
The
true.
library or ask your friends.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I mean, that was you kind of weaved into one of my questions too. Like, was there any specific like filming techniques or production design elements to enhance the film? But the bones definitely seems to be one of the major highlights.
I think the skeleton bones, I think we borrowed just from a friend.
Yeah.
Possibly Andy.
I can't remember, but I feel like they came from like a biology lab or something like that, or they were someone's props. But they were in color correction. It was funny because the colorist was like, these these bones are very, very white, and then the other bones are very, very dirty. So, like, do you want to talk about that? Do you want them to be the same color? And it's like, please, I would really like them to be the same color. Do your magic. And I think I think Lenny did a really, really good job at that. But yeah, the bones was a big saga.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we didn't add any effects.
No.
Originally, when we were trying to add some really basic effects or fixed problem areas with an actual optical printer. So it was, re-photographing the film, by hand with another camera. And we, had added we'd slowed down some parts and added maybe some color filters, but that was pretty much it. And then when we went back, to revisit the film last year, we decided, well, this is something we don't really need this. And it's also something that's really easy to do in post-production now on a computer. So actually there's way less effects than we were trying to do in the beginning, because we just took them out. I think there's just maybe a couple shots where we slowed it down slightly on the computer, but it was already like that in the optical printed footage.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, to add to that, going back then, digital editing was just getting started, and we actually had access to a Steenbeck and optical printers. That's what we had access to at the time. So in order to reverse footage, you actually had to re-photograph it in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things where I remember we did that like a bunch of times, trying to get it right in optical printing, which is a very manual process. And then flash forward to 2024, and we're like, wow, we don't need to use this at all. We can just hit reverse,
Right.
and like get the timing perfect.
Because when you re-photograph the film, and as hard as you try, like dust, speckles, and hairs get into the gate, and yeah, it's just, and the film is more grainy after you re-photograph it. And so yeah, we just decide, well, we'll just go back to the original and do the same effect on the computer, and it'll look much better. So that's really the only effects that we're adding, just such minimal basic things that are barely even used in the film. So most of it is, just the original footage that we shot, and and then color corrected later in post.
Mm-hmm.
So
No, that's cool. And yeah, no, and just even like thinking as you guys are reflecting on the different, techniques and, effects and everything, and how can I phrase this question? Yeah. So like looking back, like on the film now and how it's been like over 2 decades, like would you change anything, or how are you feeling about it?
well, we wish that we maybe had developed the story a little bit longer, because, and when we revisit the film last year, and we realized we had to cut out some scenes from the original film. So there was a couple lines of dialogue that got cut, unfortunately. Just there were things that just weren't really working. Just some continuity issues. And the film was actually originally much longer. It was twice the length, but a lot of the footage that we cut was actually just like parts of songs that we just didn't need the entire song.
Mhm.
So it was sort of just, it was sort of dragging on a bit. But yeah, we do wish that we had maybe developed the story a bit more. There had been some more dialogue. So if we could go back, I think we would have made the script a little longer.
I think there's one scene that there's no going back and doing a reshoot, 25 years later, for sure. Like that's not going to happen. But I think that there's definitely one scene that I would have added if given an opportunity when we were re-editing last year,
Mhm.
just to fill out the climactic scene just a tiny bit more. But other than that, I think the biggest thing the biggest difference in hindsight is that attention spans were really, really different, are really different now than they were back then. And I remember when we were first making it and talking to people, and they were talking about like things like optimum lengths and, how long of a script to write and all of those things. It was really 20-minute mark back then. And then if you to have that same conversation now, everyone is like under 15. You can't go like under 10 is better, but like under 15. And it's pretty amazing to pull something out of storage, watch like a 20-minute cut, and then just think about how much attention span has changed and say, actually, we don't need all of this.
Mhm.
because no one has, it's not going to behold in the same way that it would have in the 90s, let alone in the 60s. Like if you watch a lot of older films and television shows, there's a lot of establishing. There's really like you get in the car, you drive to the place, you get out of the car and you go up the stairs, and then you have this scene, and then you leave the scene and you walk, and there's all of this establishing stuff that the way we edit and jump in time, it wasn't as common in those movies. So when we shot this, we really tried to honor that. And we had all these scenes of like, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and we're going to watch the whole thing. And It was really in that rhythm. And then you flash forward to now, and it's way more common to jump in time. And so a lot of that just seems gratuitous. So we ended up cutting a lot of it out because it just wasn't necessary to the story, but it was part of the original rhythm. So that was a little bit of what we had to resolve as to how to keep the rhythm, but then move the story along and not be too cutty, because like our editing style now is very, very different from the way it was in the 60s, which was what we were trying to honor. It's like that original. If you watched an Annette Funicello movie, you hear the whole song. Mm-hmm. And it just is unnecessary now.
So did you come then? I guess that kind of makes me curious to ask, like, did you guys come up with a soundtrack like to produce like onto a CD for your film?
We're thinking about that. We need to figure out what is possible, and talk to all the musicians. Get all the musicians on board. But we'd like to, and a lot of that was coming out of the DC screenings, because after the screening, several people came up to me asking like, hey, is there anywhere we can hear the music? And there actually isn't, because that music is really specific to our film. So it got me thinking. And then when we posted a trailer online, some of the comments on Instagram were, are you going to release the soundtrack or like release the tapes kind of thing? And so it's something that we've been thinking about, but we do need to talk to the musicians about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I could see that taking off in the sense of like whether it's a Spotify playlist or starting off from there. So in a few films that I had done like a previous podcast interview with, like have their own soundtracks as something separate. So yeah, but your music's so groovy and very unique that I'm so glad that it's
I think considering the bands that were involved, there could be more interest for the soundtrack, especially since a lot of the music was original just to the film.
Yeah, it's important to mention that the Makeup, which was the band on the beach, they were actually based in DC, and a couple of them are originally from DC. So that there was that DC connection back then. They've all relocated, and they still do tour around together, although they're all in different bands now. They still do tour around. So it's a nice little DC connection to them.
Cool. Yeah, no, I love that. That's amazing. And this has been a great conversation too. I really appreciate the both of you joining me. Is there anything that I may not have asked or that we didn't discuss that you wanted to share?
We're so happy that it premiered at DCIFF. And it seemed fitting because, what did have that DC connection. So yeah, it was a great first screening.
Yeah, thank you for including it, and thank you for the podcast. It's really nice to just complete it after all these years and see it take on its life, because we really wanted to thank everyone that got involved. And I guess the only thing we didn't talk about was like what took so long is we did it when we were right at a kind of a really big transitional point in our lives, and everyone, specifically Leah and I, we went on to we move on to other projects and stuff like that. So I think in hindsight, we never thought it would take this long, but the big impetus to finish it was always there. And we really wanted to finish it as, if nothing else, a thank you to everyone that was in it, to make sure that it actually got out there, and all of their music specifically did get out into the world, because it was something that they created really for the film. And so I can't think of the film without the music. Those two do go hand in hand, and it's really great to finally see it have a life and premiere in DC and go to some other festivals and who knows where after.
Yeah, we're just thrilled that that it's finally done, and we sort of got it off our chest
Yeah.
out into the world. And it turned out it's a lot of fun. And I think that's the main takeaway is we want people to enjoy it and have a lot of fun watching it.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun to make. It was a lot of fun to be in for a lot of our friends. It was a lot of fun to collaborate on. And I hear that it is fun to watch. So we hope that all rings true.
Okay.
But thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us.
Yes, thank you guys. Of course. This podcast is brought to you by the DCIFF supporters. We could not be here without all of you to be sharing this amazing outlet with filmmakers from around the world. If you are interested in supporting DCIFF, head on over to our website through the link description in the bio of this episode, or you can go right to the website, which is DCIFF-INDIE.org. to connect with us and learn more about our Future of Film programs, our festival, and also more educational opportunities in what we do with our high school students, community, and beyond. We look forward to your support.